Well, welcome into the Gym Sport Go podcast. I'm joined this time by the one and only Grant Nisbett because there is no All Black rugby probably at all this year. So no team really to pick for Ian Foster, Nisbo, and you and I have decided that we'll come up with our own team, I guess.
G'day, Jim. Yeah, absolutely. It does look a little bit forlorn, doesn't it? I mean, it very much depends on how this thing plays out and whether the borders are open, because if the borders are not open, then obviously the All Blacks are hardly likely to be able to leave, and nobody's likely to come here. So it might be a trivia question in years to come. Name the year that the All Blacks didn't actually play a game. But we'll wait and see.
We will wait and see. So the challenge that I've given both of us is to pick a team in the professional era. Now that goes from 96, of course, when they went to South Africa and won the series in South Africa. And there's a couple of very handy players like Zinzan Brooke and Sean Fitzpatrick and Michael Jones and Olo Brown, maybe even Frank Bunce that sneak in because of that tour that was part of the professional era. How does that sway your thinking?
Yeah, well, they were great players, weren't they? Absolutely. There's a tendency, I guess, to concentrate on the either present players or the guys one kind of generation removed. And we tend to forget what things were like 25 years ago when professional rugby first started, of course. It was the year after the All Blacks were beaten in the World Cup final. They went back to South Africa, as we know, and they won that historic series over there. And the guys that you were talking about were part of that. Some of them didn't play a lot longer for the All Blacks, but my word, they were fine players. They were great players even.
So, mate, let's rip into it because I think fullback is one that we're probably going to agree on quite easily. For me, he's one of the greatest players I've ever seen, Christian Cullen.
He is the greatest player I've ever seen, Jim. I've often been asked that question, and people kind of poo-poo me a wee bit and say, what about McCaw? What about Carter and these sort of blokes? But I'm always steadfast in saying that Christian Cullen is the best rugby player that I have personally ever seen. I've never seen someone who has had the ability to change the course of a match so often in one game, and he could do everything. Don't forget he was a terrific defender, but he had the ability to score tries. He just had everything, Christian Cullen. So I know there's a few other contenders in there, and we can name a few other names, I'm sure, over the last 25 years, but I think we'd be wasting our time because I think Cullen is the best I've ever seen.
Yep, and I think maybe left wing is probably going to be quite easy too, mate. The big rig, Jonah Lomu, he was incomparable, wasn't he?
He was, absolutely. I mean, he wasn't as we know, he wasn't the complete package by any means. You could be critical on occasions of his ability in defence, maybe. But my word, with the ball in hand, nobody better. And we all know how he burst on the scene. Well, initially in 94, but then more so in 95. Funnily enough, in that series we were talking about, he pretty much sat in the stand most of the time. But
no, Glenn Osborne on the wing.
Yeah, amazing. Yes, absolutely. Osborne, who was mainly a fullback, played on the wing in that series, and Jonah didn't get much of a look on, but hey, what a great player. What a fantastic player. And, there are others we could consider, I guess.
Doug Howlett was a very good wing, although mainly on the other side. I think right wing is going to be a bit tricky for us because I would have gone with Sir John Kirwan, but he doesn't qualify. Doug Howlett was a fine player. And then you got the likes of Sidovini and Joeli Vinderi, Joe Rokocoko. They were mostly on the left wing, weren't they? So do we go with the golden one for the right wing?
I would. Yes, I would. So Lomo on the left and Jeff Wilson on the right. Now, I know he played a fair bit at fullback and he was also tried at centre, I think, latterly in the World Cup. But he fundamentally, in me, was a winger. He was fantastic for the Highlanders. We all know that. And he was fantastic in that series that we were talking about back in 96. He had it all, Jeff Wilson. He really did. He had pace and he just had rugby nous.
Yeah.
And so, to me, he wins that battle. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, Doug Howlett remains the All Blacks' top try scorer of all time. So he's hard to ignore, but I can't go past Jeff.
No, and the stats sort of back you up there in terms of the All Blacks. He played 17 times at fullback for the All Blacks, or started there, and 40 times on the right wing. So that sort of sorts that one out. Another guy who got moved around a bit was Tana Umanga, 12 on the left wing, 7 at second 5, 42 at centre and 12 on the right wing. Now, Nisbett, I'm in two minds about my midfield. It's so easy to go Smith and Nonu because they played so much rugby together. But Tana Umanga and Aaron Major were a beautiful midfield combination.
Yeah, they were, absolutely. And I think when you're looking, Jim, at midfield, you do tend to look for a combination, blokes who play well together. And Smith and Nonu rolls off the tongue a wee bit, doesn't it? And as you say, Umanga, Major, certainly. Another name in there that perhaps a little underrated. He probably wouldn't make our team, but I always liked Lee Stensness. I thought he was a fabulous player. And there are other names in there, the Meyerhofflers and the Gibsons from the Crusaders, who were so good over a long period of time.
Buncey, Walter Little, Sonny Bill Williams.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I was coming to Bunsen Little because that, as you say, is a combination, a bit like Smith and Nonu. You kind of threw Bunsen Little in together. As a solo act, they probably didn't go as well, but when you put them together, they were fantastic. But I think Smith and Nonu probably wins the battle for me.
All right, we'll go Smith and Nonu, mate. I'm not going to argue with you over that one because we're splitting hairs between some marvellous players. I think first five's probably as easy as fullback was. We've had some great first fives in the professional era with Mertens and Carlos Spencer, to name just two. And Bowden Barrett now as well, Nisbett. He's a pretty handy first five. But I can't go past Dan Carter. I mean, that test match against the Lions, the second one in Wellington, you remember that well. He scored in every way possible. And his performance in the World Cup final against Australia in 2015 was just magnificent.
Yeah, look, he was the prince of first fives. There's no question about that. But he followed some good ones, didn't he? The guys you mentioned, Carlos. Before him, Grant Fox, of course.
Yes.
Then Carlos, and then Andrew Mertens. And ironically, Carter had to start at second five, but he really found his niche at first five. So, look, I don't think we're going to argue over this one, Jim. Dan Carter for sure.
I think we might get in trouble at halfback, though. There's a bloke who's now living in Queenstown who might give us a phone call. And Justin Marshall was a wonderful halfback who played a lot of rugby in competition with Byron Kelleher. But I think if we look at guys who have completely sort of not changed, but I guess given a breath of fresh air to a position, Cullen did that, Carter did that, and Aaron Smith's done the same thing, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, he's overtaken Justin, of course, as our top capped halfback of all time. And I know Justin has got a lot of admiration for Aaron Smith, and I know that he presented him with a special jersey when he overtook him as our most capped halfback. So I don't think he'd be too worried if we named Aaron Smith as our favourite favourite halfback. They played in different eras, obviously, and we've been very, very lucky, haven't we, with the halfbacks we've had over a period of time, and they fitted nicely in. So for me, Marshall was outstanding. Played a lot of tests, 81, I think. But Aaron Smith has just added a new dimension in terms of clearance and passing ability. Justin was a different sort of halfback. You could almost class him as a fourth loose forward on occasions. Big and strong and powerful. Smith's not like that at all. But for me, he gets the nod.
Now, I'm convinced that if the professional era had come at a different time, Zinzan Brook would be the name that we're writing down on this piece of paper because, man, he had it all. He was big, he was strong, he had beautiful passes. I can remember him in a game, Auckland versus, I think, Bay of Plenty. He trapped the ball like it was a soccer ball, flicked it up between his feet, caught it, and threw a long cutout pass. He just had skills galore. But I reckon if we look at the professional era and it's, in the 25 years, Kieran Reid's probably going to be a hard one not to pick.
Yeah, I think you're right. Zinzan snuck in at the beginning of the professional era, and who'll ever forget that night or that day in Pretoria when he drop-kicked that goal, part of the All Blacks' victory, which actually gave them their first ever series win in South Africa. Now, he was a phenomenal player. I saw a lot of Zinzan Brook. He scored a lot of his tries, and you don't see it today from pushover tries, just collapsing on the ball. So you might just get a little bit carried away about how many tries he scored. They were a phenomenal amount. Kieran Reid, different sort of player. And in terms of longevity, he's sort of in the front of our mind, isn't he? Because he's played for the last decade. for the All Blacks. So it's a tough one. Zinzan was a colossal player. He really was. But I think I'm going with Kieran.
Now, this one's going to hurt me a lot, open side flanker, because I have huge admiration for both of them. Sir Michael Jones, I just remember him as a young fella, you know, and that came his performances at the '87 World Cup. And again, I think if he'd been in the professional era for longer, he'd be a very hard man not to pick. For me, he's the best All Black player that I've seen, but I think Richie McCaw has had the most influence over the All Blacks of anyone else I've seen, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, this is always a tough one. And the easy way out here is to put them both in.
Six.
Well, that's right, you know, because Michael, when he came back from the injury, played quite a bit at 6, and he was still a fantastic player. There's no question of that. But prior to that horrible injury that he got against Argentina at Athletic Park that day, he was the prince of number 7s without any doubt whatsoever. And it slowed him down a wee bit. The fact that he even came back from the injury was phenomenal, but he did. And he was still a great player. But, you know, in terms, as you say, in terms of influence and names that spring to mind as outstanding world-class loose forwards, Richie McCaw is right there. So if we're talking specifically about 7, which we are, I'm probably going to have to lean towards Richie.
Blindside flanker, again, we've had some wonderful blindside flankers. Ruben Thorne, much maligned, but was picked by 3 different All Black coaches. So that tells you something about his value. And then we had Jerry Collins, who was just brutal on the side of the scrum for the All Blacks. I don't think I've probably seen a tougher tackler, really, certainly in the loose forwards. I don't know, I'm trying to think of some, maybe the odd midfielder, maybe, Bunsey, I don't know. And then Jerome Kano, another fantastic player. Where are you going to go that way? I'll let you go.
Well, that's a toughie. And, well, I mean, you talk about tough tacklers. I mean, Jerome Kano wasn't bad himself, was he?
Yes, absolutely.
He could nail them. Ruben Thorne, yes, much maligned, as you say, but always well respected by teammates. You didn't see much of him around the park, but what he did extremely well. So he's certainly got to be in the mix. There's no doubt about that. Jerry Collins, a bit of an enigma, really, Jerry. No one ever really quite got to know the bloke, although the players that played with him felt that he was just a fantastic bloke. He was a very popular character. And as you say, Jerome Kano, I don't know, Jim. I'm going to go with Kano. I think it's just a toss-up between him and Jerry Collins. But I think now that Kano is gone, we realise how much we miss him. I mean, it's only been a couple of years.
That's true.
Before he's been hard to replace, we haven't really nailed a number 6 in the meantime.
No, but I suspect that we would have been saying the same about Jerry Collins if not for Jerome Kano. I'm going to go Jerry Collins, so that's one that we'll disagree on. But that's okay. Lock. Yeah. I can pick one lock, and then I've got 3 that I can't decide from. Brodie Retallick makes my team hands down. Fantastic athlete. I remember that game in Napier, mate, against Argentina. It was pouring with rain. He got a bootlaces pass, picked it up through a double cutout pass, and Julian Savia scored in the corner, and that from a lock. And he was always doing his core jobs as well, you know. And I don't know about you, but I would hate to have been hit by him at a ruck.
Yeah, exactly. He's got skills that locks aren't supposed to have.
Yeah.
You know, once upon a time, locks were big, tall fellas who jumped in the line out, did a wee bit around the park, but that was basically it. But he has brought all sorts of new dimensions to the locking position, second row. So I agree with you. He goes in without any question whatsoever.
So
but
then,
the dilemma we have now is who's going to join him.
Is it Ian Jones, Brad Thorne, Sam Whitelock, Chris Jack, Ali Williams? I don't know. Help me out.
Well, I'm going to go with my old mate Camo, actually. He played mainly in a different era, and who will ever forget his performances? I think in the World Cup final, he was probably man of the match.
And that was in the
you had to jump.
You had to jump, eh? Yeah.
Yeah. You had to jump in the line out. He had a bit of mongrel about him too, Camo. And maybe he wouldn't quite get away with that today. But I didn't mind that too much in that particular context. So, look, the other names you mentioned, absolutely. Robin Brooke, Sam Whitelock, who's been Brodie Retallick's locking partner for so long. And again, we look at combinations, I suppose. Brad Thorne, yeah. I put him just a little bit below those guys.
Yep.
A workhorse who never lets you down. But, hey, I'm going with Ian Jones.
I'm not opposed to that. 79 Test matches he played for the All Blacks. It's not a bad record at all. Front row, there's a couple there again who sneak in from that amateur into professional, the likes of Olo Brown, who was a wonderful prop. But I'm going to go, and a lot of this is based on his performance against the Lions, and when was that? 2005. For me, mate, Carl Heyman. I mean, if you wanted a tight head prop who was just never going to move, Carl Heyman was the man.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. It's sad that he didn't play a lot more for the All Blacks, actually. He made the decision to go overseas and got stuck over there, and we never saw him again. So
yeah,
it was a bit sad that, we didn't see him probably at his best. He was a fantastic tight head prop, which is what we're talking about at the moment. Olo Brown, look, he was arguably the best scrummager of all of them, simply because you looked at a scrum and his back was always ramrod straight, wasn't it?
You could have laid a table on it, couldn't you? Tablecloth over the top, plate, cup, you never would have spilled a drop.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's some other names that crop in there, and I can't remember now whether they were tight or loose head. Case Muse was a good player.
Owen Franks.
Somerville. Yeah, well, Owen Franks, yeah, absolutely. Well, you don't play over 100 Test matches for the All Blacks and not be a good player.
No.
You didn't see a lot of Owen Franks around the field, but, he did his core job and he was pretty solid tackling. Look, I'm going to go with Olo Brown. I'm going back to the older era, I guess. So I'm going to oppose you there. If you've got a Heyman, I'm going to go with Olo.
Not a problem. We agree on Tony Woodcock on the loose head side, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. He sewed up that position pretty much for a decade. Scored a winning try in a World Cup final. What more can you ask of a bloke? And very much understated. Pretty much like all props, to be honest. You don't get much out of Olo Brown even now. You get very little out of Tony Woodcock, but he got the job done and he was world class.
All right, hooker. I think I know where we're both going to go here. Look, Anton Oliver was a great hooker. Kevin Mialami played all those 130-odd games, and Andrew Hall was in there as well. Fitzy sneaks in too. We've got to remember that. Played 96, a little bit of 97 until his knee gave out. But if you're looking for a hooker who does it in the tight, does it in the loose, can run like a second five, can throw beautiful balls, it's got to be Dane Coles, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is for me. I mean, a word about Fitzy, because he was fantastic in his time. There's no doubt about that. Come 96, he was starting to perhaps get to the end of it, but he did lead the All Blacks on that tour where they became the first team to win a series in South Africa. And as you say, for a guy who didn't previously get very many injuries, it was quite sad to see the way that injury kind of curtailed him early. I'm sure they would have loved to get him through, and probably Zinzan through to the World Cup in 99, but never quite made it. But Dane Coles has redefined the way hookers play. He does all the core things right. Very good scrummager, big, powerful bloke, throws the ball in well, but in open play or broken play, unbelievable. Some of the tries that he scored, and I do remember one at Eden Park against the Wallabies about 3 years ago,
yes,
where he stood up about 3 or 4 Wallaby backs and ran round them and scored. Well, no other hooker in the history of world rugby has been able to do that. And it's a bit unfortunate for Cody Taylor because he would be right in the mix. But I think because he's also outstanding. But
very good.
I think you're right, Jim. There's only one, and that is Dane Coles.
And he plays for our club, Poniki, so let's put him in there for that reason alone.
Nothing to do with it.
So we've got Christian Cullen fullback, Jeff Wilson on the right wing, Jonah Lomu on the left wing, Smith and Nonu in the midfield, Carter and Smith in the first 5 halfback, Kieran Reid, Richie McCaw. Then we have a little bit of a disagreement, a bit of a gentleman's disagreement, I think, Nisbett at blindside between Collins and Jerome Kano, Ian Jones and Big Brodie Retallick, Woodcock, Dane Coles, and you've got Olo Brown. I've gone Carl Heyman. Mate, Foxy always says your team never has to play. If that team played, it would be a pretty handy team.
It'll be a very good team. There's no doubt about it. And I'd defy anyone to put a team up that would beat it.
Yep. Hey, mate, thank you so much for your time. Stay safe wherever you are, and stay nice and healthy too, eh?
Good on you, Jim. Cheers.